So we're here at a site called K Sultan. This is just near Abydos in southern Egypt. It's near another site we're going to look at, a very important site which you can see behind me just about over in the distance, which was the domain of King Khasekhemwy. And he was a giant king, 8'5" tall, and he was part of the second dynasty. But what we're really here for is to go and look at that site. But here is interesting, this dates back to 2700 BC, but it has constructions. Some of these mud brick constructions you can see over here date back to the first dynasty. Even there's tombs that are pre-dynastic in this area around Abydos. It's kind of famous as being a massive grave site around Abydos. Obviously we have the Abydos temple, which is the era of Seti I, and the Assyrian, which could be older than anything. But the fact is we've got quite advanced mud brick construction, and the stone you can see behind me here is actually from the Middle Kingdom. So all the different pharaonic eras are represented here. And this was used as a kind of sacred place and also a burial place of many of the ancient pharaohs. So this is linked with Shuna El Zebib, which is the site we're really here to look at, which is a gigantic structure, mud brick structure, but quite advanced. And this is where they found these inscriptions relating it to King Khasekhemwy, who again I mentioned is the giant king, the giant pharaoh. And we're going to have a look around this site first, this Sultan. We're going to have a quick look here first. This is really off the beaten track. No one really comes here. But you do have evidence, some evidence of Middle Kingdom activity here. You can see that with these pillars, see that with some of these stones. So let's have a quick look at that first. So these are pretty massive, look at these. So this is potentially Middle Kingdom, they say. But the original construction goes literally back to the very first dynasty. So even the Middle Kingdom constructions here, huge stones. I mean, look, you've got a stone here, it's probably like 30 tons. And then behind it, you have the mud brick combined with all these different eras into one site. So we've got to be careful, there's snakes, scorpions and everything else here. This is off the beaten track. So you've got to watch where you're treading, that's for sure. So interestingly, this area, just over there in fact, is where they found the tiny statue of Khufu. They didn't find it on the Giza plateau, they found it here. But the thing is, they think that was found from the 26th dynasty, and it was actually used as a pendant by one of the workers at the site. So it's not even like an original statue of Khufu. There's very few statues of him, if any. And the interesting thing about that little statue, which you'll see an image of it from the museum, the Cairo Museum, it's now on display, is the fact that Flinders Petrie, it set out a search because it had the head missing, and eventually it took them 3 weeks to find the head to put it back on the statue, this tiny statue, which was actually a pendant from a much later period. So what on earth is going on here? Why was Khufu given the kind of position of the pyramid builder, the Great Pyramid Builder? It seems like it's just kind of being thrown together by Egyptologists, and it appears that he may not have been involved at all. Or if he was, it would have been in the reconstructions that took place on the Giza plateau. So it's interesting to know that that was actually found in this area. So you can just notice that there are different styles here, which have been pointed out by the local archaeologists. There's the mud brick style, which actually is very ancient and very, for its time, sophisticated, going back to at least the first dynasty. Then you have this Middle Kingdom, this fine limestone, very large blocks. We do find some stone linked with King Khasekhemwy, but not too much, although he was actually linked with Saqqara. There's a thought that he may have been even the father, or at least the ancestor of Zosa. Even this mud brick is interesting because people would actually take it away and break it down and use it as a fertilizer, because it picked up all these microbes and things like this. So it had multi-purpose even after its original purpose, its original use. Just finishing our excursion here at K Sultan. Now we're going to head up Shunet El Zebib, which is the site we're really here for. But it's really worth checking this out if you get a chance. You have to get cars here. You can't take a bus from Abydos. The roads are too small. And this is also the area where the famous Dorothy Eady, or Seti, lived. She lived in this whole kind of, you know, even the homes here were made of mud brick. So she actually lived in a mud brick construction on the edge of Abydos. So we're going to continue now. Hope you enjoy this little visit, and we'll see you at the next site. So here we are at Shuna El Zebib near Abydos. Now this is really quite remarkable. The oldest surviving mud brick building in the world, 2700 BC. And this is the domain of King Khasekhemwy, the giant king who stood at 8 feet 5 tall. Look at this. This is absolutely mind-blowing. This is the domain, apparently, of this great giant king, Khasekhemwy. And he was, according to Manetho, writing in the 3rd century BC, he was 8 foot 5 inches tall. So that's one of the remarkable giant stories of this era. So we're walking down one side of the site here. And you can see just up here, I want to just show you this because this is almost identical to the walls we find in Saqqara. Not this one just now, but we'll get there in a second. Because there's a strong connection between this particular site and Saqqara because of King Khasekhemwy. And you can see that here, you can see the style of these walls. This is what we find around the edge of Saqqara. So this is pretty amazing that we have almost the same style, even though this is mud brick and Saqqara is stone. So these walls are really interesting because these are, even though they're mud brick, this is quite an advanced style for its time. And we'll see this at Saqqara. I'll show you some images and some footage that this is the same style. And also we must remember this whole structure is oriented north, south, east, west to the corners, even though it's a rectangle. So this is before the Great Pyramid. And now, although I mentioned it was 2700 BC, it may be 2800 BC. I've just been informed by the local archaeologists it could even be older. They found other things here which have even pushed the date back even further. And so the fact you've got this as one of the earliest constructions in Egypt, it's also the oldest surviving mud brick building in the world. It really does suggest this is a very important site in the history of ancient Egypt. So you need an armed escort to come to this site, but still, it's very interesting. So we're just walking into the main part of the site now. And actually over in this direction, behind the wall going into what looks like desert, towards the other sites in this area, is where they found this boat graveyard. They found 14 boats, some up to 72 feet long. Some of them are still buried because they're keeping them for preservation. But this is almost like an influence of what we find around the Great Pyramid. And it also proved that this Khasekhemwy, giant king, was a very influential ruler. He was said not only to have united North and South Egypt, but also been influential at Saqqara. There's been statues and carvings of his name found even at Byblos in Lebanon, which suggests the cedar wood and the influence that had here may have been not only come from Lebanon, but actually been King Khasekhemwy may have been instrumental in bringing that to Egypt in the first place. And so what is going on here? He seems to be this king. He's removed from the Abydos king list. He was kind of almost like pushed out of history. But Robert Temple, and thanks to Manetho in the 3rd century BC, they recorded who he was, his height, and his burial places and the sites he was involved in constructing. And I think there's much more to him than meets the eye, and he may have been a big influence on what we see here in ancient Egypt. So here we have one of the main doorways, and you can see the thickness of the walls here and the structure. And then even out here towards the mountains, there's more constructions, there's more graves. This whole area really was like a giant graveyard, not just for people, but also for these boats, these large ships almost, that were found here. And you can see this is one of the main doorways into the site. And again, just down here, and it had 2 layers, remember, you can see here we're kind of walking between them. you can see this walling, the way they've got protrusions out. Again, this is the influence that ended up in the stonework in the outer walls at Saqqara. This is one of the doorways, reconstructed doorways here at the site, but there's some interesting features which we'll have a look at, which include strange kind of ribs going across the roof there. So we've got this doorway here, and you've got this going across. So now this is reconstructed, but it's a thought that they would actually shape the kind of mud bricks and mud into this. And strangely, if you remember on the Giza Plateau, you look at my Secrets of Giza video, looking at the mega platforms and hypogeums, we find this kind of style there. We also find this kind of style on some of the roofs at Saqqara. So this may be what it really looked like. And obviously this goes out into the main mega complex, the largest standing mud brick building in the world. And the fact that on the other side we have like a double wall all the way around the whole site. So this is just such an interesting site. Even though it's not megalithic as such, it had elements to it which date back to the earliest phase of building in ancient Egypt. So we're now just leaving Shuna El Zebib. This is a real treat to come here. It's off the beaten path. You can't really come here easily. You kind of need security. The archaeologist is with us. We arranged it all. But we will try and come here again on our tours that we do every November, because it's near Abydos, and this is really, you know, the first construction officially in ancient Egypt, and certainly the oldest mud brick building, surviving one in the world. And it's linked with a giant king who was 8.5 feet tall. So thanks for watching, Megalithomaniacs. We appreciate your time, and we'll see you next time.